Maya Okonkwo's hands trembled as she pushed her cleaning cart through the marble corridors of the Azure Heights Hotel. Her braids were pulled back in a tight ponytail, her uniform wrinkled from back-to-back shifts. Sleep had become a luxury she couldn't afford. Her mother's chemotherapy treatments were draining every naira she earned, and each overtime shift felt like climbing Everest with weights on her shoulders. She checked her assignment sheet. Next stop, Penthouse Suite 2204. Across the city, Park Ji-hoon stepped out of his private helicopter onto the hotel's rooftop landing pad. The Korean tech mogul had arrived from Seoul for a crucial investor meeting. His new blockchain venture needed funding, and everything had to be perfect. But nothing was going right. His flight had been turbulent. His team had sent him the wrong briefing documents. And now he was being told his suite needed another 20 minutes. His jaw clenched as he strode through the hallway, designer briefcase in hand, eyes fixed on his phone's screen. Then it happened. Maya, exhausted and distracted, turned the corner with her supply cart. Ji-hoon, furious and focused on his call, rounded the same bend at full speed. The collision sent cleaning bottles flying. Soapy water splashed across his Italian leather shoes and up the legs of his perfectly pressed trousers. His phone clattered to the floor. Time seemed to stop. Maya's eyes went wide with horror. "I'm so sorry, sir. Please, I didn't see you." Ji-hoon's voice was cold as winter in Seoul. "Do you have any idea what you've just done?" "I wasn't looking. Please forgive me." Maya's voice shook. Other staff members stopped to stare. Ji-hoon's words cut like glass. "These shoes cost more than what you make in 6 months." Shame flooded Maya's chest. She kept her head down. "It was an accident, sir. I didn't mean it." Ji-hoon walked past her without another word, leaving wet footprints and icy silence behind him. In his suite, as he changed clothes, he muttered in Korean, "This entire trip is a disaster." He had no idea that the woman who had just humiliated him would soon become the center of his universe. Maya finished her shift with tears threatening to spill and a knot in her stomach. The gossip followed her like a shadow. "You threw water on Park Ji-hoon? Girl, do you want to get deported?" But she couldn't afford to care about rumors. Her mother needed her next treatment. She had to keep this job no matter what. That evening, her manager handed her a keycard. "Suite 2204. The guest is out. Get it done quickly." Maya nodded, took a breath, and rode the elevator in heavy silence. She didn't realize it was his suite until she stepped inside. The penthouse was stunning. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Lagos at sunset. Everything was sleek, modern, minimalist. Maya moved quietly through the space, dusting surfaces and straightening pillows. Her body ached. Her eyes burned from lack of sleep. When she reached the master bedroom, exhaustion won. Just 5 minutes, she told herself. She sat on the edge of the enormous bed to rest her legs. Her eyes drifted closed. She never meant to fall asleep. Ji-hoon returned late, his mood darker than before. The investors had been skeptical. The meeting had gone nowhere. He pushed open the door to his suite, loosening his tie, and stopped dead in his tracks. Someone was in his bed, not an intruder, not a fan. A hotel cleaner fast asleep across his sheets, a microfiber cloth still clutched in her hand. His eyes widened in disbelief. What in the world? He crossed the room in 3 strides and shook her shoulder firmly. Maya jerked awake, her heart hammering. "No, sir, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to. Please don't fire me." Ji-hoon's voice was sharp. "What are you doing in my bed? Are you out of your mind?" Tears sprang to her eyes immediately. "I was so tired. I'm sorry. I didn't realize I fell asleep. Please, please don't report me." He froze. Recognition hit him. Her, the same woman from the hallway, the water, the mess. His anger flared, then wavered. There was something in her expression, not just panic, not just regret, deep, bone-weary exhaustion. Still, his pride held firm. "Get out," he said coldly. Maya scrambled off the bed, nearly falling in her rush to escape. The door closed softly behind her. Ji-hoon stood there motionless, then slowly sat where she had been lying, fists clenched, jaw tight. Who was this woman, and why couldn't he stop thinking about her? Maya's heart pounded as she fled down the corridor. Her legs felt weak by the time she reached the staff area. She didn't notice the curious stares from her coworkers. In the locker room, she collapsed onto a bench and buried her face in her hands. Her fingers smelled like the hotel's lavender cleaning spray. Her face burned with humiliation. How could she have fallen asleep in a guest's bed? Not just any guest. Park Ji-hoon, a Korean billionaire, a technology genius, a VIP client. She was certain she'd be fired by morning. Minutes later, her manager stormed in, tablet in hand. Maya, what were you thinking? I swear it was an accident. You fell asleep in his bed. Do you know how lucky you are he didn't have you arrested? I promise it won't happen again. I don't want to hear excuses. He specifically requested that you never clean his suite again. Ever. Maya nodded quickly, her voice barely audible. Yes, ma'am. The manager sighed heavily. He didn't fire you. Consider yourself lucky, but one more mistake and you're done. Understood, Maya whispered. That night, she didn't go straight home. She went to the public hospital where her mother lay sleeping, pale and fragile. She gently adjusted her mother's blanket, her own worries fading as she watched the shallow rise and fall of her chest. Back at the hotel, Ji-hoon stood by the window of his suite, staring out at the glittering city below. He had tried to forget her, that strange, quiet woman who had ruined his shoes and then fallen asleep in his bed like she owned it. But he couldn't stop thinking about her. Who works so hard they collapse? What kind of life leads to that? He opened his laptop and stared at a financial spreadsheet, but the numbers blurred together. Ji-hoon closed it and leaned back, frustrated. There's something about her, he muttered to himself in Korean. Something he didn't understand and didn't want to feel. Not yet. The next morning, Maya arrived early for her shift, eyes heavy from another sleepless night. She braced herself for more whispers, more judgment. But to her surprise, the staff acted strangely distant. No teasing, no giggles. In fact, they avoided her completely. It wasn't until she reached the staff kitchen that her manager approached her again, this time looking confused. You've been requested specifically. Maya blinked. What do you mean? Room service, suite 2204. Mr. Park asked for you by name. She felt the blood drain from her face. Why would he do that? The manager shrugged. Your guess is as good as mine. Just deliver the order and come straight back. And behave yourself. Minutes later, Maya stood outside the door that haunted her dreams. She took a deep breath and knocked softly. Ji-hoon opened the door himself. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, his hair slightly disheveled. He looked less like a billionaire and more like a man who hadn't slept well either. Come in, he said simply. Maya stepped inside quietly, keeping her eyes on the floor. She placed the tray down on the glass coffee table, her hands shaking slightly. I'm sorry again for yesterday, she said softly. Ji-hoon didn't respond right away. He poured himself coffee, then said, You didn't get fired. No, sir, you're fortunate. Yes, sir. Then silence stretched between them until he spoke again. What's your name? She hesitated. Maya Okonkwo. He studied her for a long moment. Do you always work this hard? Maya's eyes lifted briefly, confused. Yes, sir, I don't really have a choice. Ji-hoon nodded slowly, that's obvious. He picked up a white envelope from the table and held it out to her. For you, Maya hesitated. Sir, I can't accept this. He cut her off. It's a tip, nothing more. She opened it after leaving the suite. 200,000 naira, more than her monthly salary. She stared at the money, heart racing. Why was he doing this? And what did he expect in return? Later in the locker room, the envelope sat beside her, heavy with possibility. The money could help her mother's treatment, buy groceries for 2 weeks, maybe even pay down some debt. But her pride whispered warnings. Nothing is free, not from people like him. Still, she made her decision. She would keep the money, but she would earn it by working harder than ever before. Back in his suite, the whispers had intensified. Staff spoke in hushed tones when she passed. Some were curious, others bitter. What does he see in her? One housekeeper muttered, She's just a cleaner. Another voice added, Probably feels sorry for her. But Maya ignored them all, focused on one thing only, survival. Later that afternoon, she was summoned again. Suite 2204, her manager said, eyes narrowed with suspicion. He asked for you again. Maya's heart thudded, but she nodded and headed toward the elevator. This time, Ji-hoon greeted her at the door with a cup of tea in his hand. You're not afraid of me anymore? He asked, almost smiling. I'm still trying to figure you out, she replied honestly. He gestured toward the seating area by the window. Sit. Maya hesitated, then perched carefully on the edge of the chair. Tell me something, Ji-hoon said. If you weren't cleaning hotel rooms, what would you be doing? Maya blinked. No one had ever asked her that. I wanted to study medicine, help people. But life had other plans. Ji-hoon nodded, saying nothing for a moment. She shifted uncomfortably. Why are you being kind to me? He turned toward her, his expression calm but serious. I don't know. Maybe because I finally noticed someone real. Silence hung between them like a question. Then suddenly he stood. You can go now. Maya rose, confused. Okay. Thank you, sir. As she reached the door, he said quietly, next time just call me Ji-hoon. She paused, nodded once, and stepped into the hallway. Behind her, the door clicked shut. Maya exhaled slowly, her heart racing. She didn't understand what was happening, but something had shifted. A name, a seat by the window, and the smallest crack in a billionaire's armor. Maya returned home that night with groceries in one hand and the envelope still hidden in her bag. Her younger sister, Amora, sat up on the mattress, her eyes brightening. "You bought chicken," she said, grinning despite the cough that followed. Maya smiled and ruffled her sister's hair. Today was strange. Strange good or strange bad? I don't know yet. She didn't mention the billionaire. She didn't talk about the whispers, just that someone had given her a generous tip. Her sister didn't press. Maya looked around their small, cramped room, cracked walls, a broken window frame, a bucket catching water from the ceiling. But tonight they had chicken and hope. Back at the Azure Heights Hotel, Ji-hoon stood on the balcony of his suite, untouched dinner on the table behind him. The city lights twinkled like fallen constellations. His assistant had called earlier. "Should I book your return flight to Seoul, sir?" Ji-hoon had paused. "No, extend the suite reservation indefinitely. Sir, are you certain? Just do it." He didn't know what he was doing anymore. This wasn't like him. He didn't get attached. He didn't linger. But there was something about Maya, her quiet strength, her fire hidden beneath exhaustion, that haunted him. The next day, Maya was called again. Same suite, same service. This time when she knocked, the door opened to soft jazz playing from a speaker. Ji-hoon sat near the window, reading something on his tablet. "You're early," he said without looking up. "I try to be punctual," Maya replied, setting down the tray. He looked up, then gestured to a chair. "Sit, just for a moment." She hesitated, but something in his tone made her comply. They sat in silence for a while. No business talk, no commands, just quiet. Finally he asked, "What do you do when you're not working?" "Try to survive," she said plainly. Ji-hoon leaned back. "You're honest." "I have no reason not to be." He smiled faintly, then picked up a second cup and poured her tea. Without a word, he placed it in front of her. Maya stared at it. No one had ever served her tea before. She sipped slowly, and for the first time, the silence between them didn't feel awkward. It felt safe. Maya walked through the staff corridor later that day, still holding the warmth of that tea in her chest. She didn't know what Ji-hoon was doing or why he kept requesting her, but part of her, deep down, didn't want it to stop. At her locker, she found a folded note tucked between her cleaning supplies. "Meet me by the rooftop garden after your shift." Her hands trembled when she found it. Her first instinct was to tear it up, throw it away, pretend it never existed. But she didn't. And that night, after her shift ended, Maya found herself standing in the hotel's rooftop garden, moonlight casting soft shadows across the plants. Ji-hoon was already there, waiting. No bodyguards, no tie, just a simple black shirt and jeans. "You came," he said, voice low. I don't know why, Maya replied, standing a few steps away. He looked at her carefully. "Do you trust me?" "No," she answered, "but I don't think you're pretending either." Ji-hoon gave a small nod, his expression unreadable. "I want to see where you live," she blinked. "Why?" "Because I don't want to keep imagining, I want to know." Silence. Then Maya said, "I don't bring people there, I'm not just people, that's the problem." They stood in that quiet tension for a while. Ji-hoon stepped closer, his voice almost a whisper. "I'm not trying to rescue you or change you. I just want to understand you." Maya looked away, her voice cracking slightly. "Most people like you don't try." "I'm not most people." She met his gaze for a moment that felt longer than it was. Then softly she said, "Fine, tomorrow after my shift." He smiled. Not the arrogant kind, but something softer, something real. "Thank you." As Maya walked home that night, her thoughts were a storm. What was she doing? This man lived in penthouses. She lived behind corrugated iron fences. He spoke in millions. She counted coins for transport, but something about the way he looked at her made her feel like she wasn't invisible. And for once, she didn't want to disappear. The next day, Maya didn't eat. Her stomach churned too much to hold anything down. After her shift, she changed into her plainest dress, combed her braids, and wore her least worn sandals. When she stepped outside, Ji-hoon was already waiting by the hotel parking lot, leaning against a sleek black car. He didn't wear a suit this time, just a casual button-down and dark pants. No watch, no air of power. He smiled gently when he saw her. "Ready?" Maya hesitated, then nodded. The drive was quiet. She noticed he didn't speak until she did. "This is the longest car ride I've ever taken with a stranger," she said finally. "Maybe we're not strangers anymore." Maya glanced at him. His voice was soft, but there was weight behind it. They reached her neighborhood just after sunset. The streetlights flickered weakly. Children played in the dusty road, their laughter cutting through the hum of generators. Ji-hoon stepped out without hesitation. You don't have to, Maya began. I want to. They walked slowly toward her building. The street narrowed. A few neighbors peered through windows. This is home, she said, voice low. They reached her door, a rusty metal sheet with a bent handle. Ji-hoon stood quietly as she unlocked it. Inside, her sister looked up from her blanket, eyes wide. Maya, who's that? Maya knelt beside her. A friend. Ji-hoon waved and smiled. Hi, I'm Ji-hoon. Amara's eyes lit up like fireworks. The tech guy from TV. Ji-hoon laughed. Maybe. They didn't stay long. Ji-hoon didn't push. He just stood near the window, watching how carefully Maya tucked Amara in, how she straightened their tiny room like it mattered more than gold. On the way back, neither of them spoke. But as Ji-hoon drove, he glanced at her and said, "Thank you for showing me your world." Maya looked out the window. It's not much. It's real. That's more than I can say for mine. That night, Maya lay awake staring at the ceiling. For the first time in years, her world had been seen and she wasn't sure how to feel about it. The days passed in soft, silent shifts. Ji-hoon still called for Maya, sometimes just for tea, sometimes for nothing at all. They spoke in fragments, questions, and glances. No declarations, no promises, and yet something grew in the space between them. At work, Maya kept her head down. Whispers still followed her. Some envious, others cruel. I heard she sleeps in his suite now. She's just lucky, that's all. She'll crash soon. They always do. Maya didn't respond, not with words. Instead, she worked harder, cleaned better, smiled less. She wanted no favors. She needed no saving. Meanwhile, Ji-hoon found himself distracted during conference calls, restless during investor meetings. His mind wandered when it shouldn't. And every time Maya knocked on his door, something unfamiliar settled over him. Not excitement, not desire, comfort. He told himself it wasn't serious, just a passing interest, but he was lying, and he knew it. Then came the bracelet. He had seen it while shopping for his sister. A delicate silver chain with a small jade stone. Simple and elegant, nothing flashy, just like Maya. He bought it without thinking. But days passed and he didn't give it to her until one evening. He placed it in a small box beneath her folded uniform in the hotel laundry room. No note, no signature. When Maya found it, her breath caught. She opened the box slowly, heart pounding. It shimmered in the dim light, quiet and beautiful. She didn't need a note. She didn't need to ask. She already knew who had left it. That night, she wore it beneath her uniform. No one saw except him. The next morning. When Maya brought breakfast to his suite, he noticed the bracelet peeking from her wrist. She didn't mention it. Neither did he. But they shared a look, a quiet, steady look that said everything neither of them could. Still, they didn't touch. Still, they didn't speak of love. But both knew they were standing at the edge of something deep and dangerous, and neither one wanted to step back. 4 weeks passed. To the world, Park Ji-hoon was still the polished billionaire with a sharp mind and colder reputation. But inside Suite 2204, something had thawed. Every knock from Maya, every cup of tea shared, chipped away at the walls he'd spent years building. And every time he looked at her, really looked, he saw someone who never asked for his money, his name, or his world, only his honesty. Then came the storm. It arrived in designer heels. Mrs. Park Ji-hoon, his mother, flew into Lagos without warning. Elegant, commanding, and fierce, she swept into the hotel lobby with 2 assistants, 1 Chanel bag, and a gaze sharp enough to cut steel. She didn't need a room. She wanted answers. Ji-hoon was in a conference call when she entered Suite 2204 unannounced. The staff scrambled. The receptionist tried to warn him, but no one stopped her. She looked around the suite, elegant, expensive, familiar, until she saw the tea service with 2 cups, the faint floral scent, a strand of unfamiliar hair on the couch pillow. She frowned. Is there a woman? Ji-hoon didn't answer. She didn't push, not yet, but her eyes narrowed. And from that moment, she began watching. Days later, standing near the lobby window, she saw it. Ji-hoon, her son, the untouchable Park heir, paused. Not for a call, not for a deal. But to smile at a hotel cleaner, a woman in a light blue uniform with quiet eyes and a serving tray in her hands. That was all she needed. Later that evening, Maya received a note. This time not from Ji-hoon. It was folded neatly with hotel letterhead. You are invited for private tea. Suite 1508, 5 p.m., Mrs. Park. Maya stared at it, heart sinking. She didn't tell anyone, not even Ji-hoon. When the time came, she changed into her cleanest uniform, smoothed her braids, and walked to the door with legs made of air. Mrs. Park opened the suite herself. She smiled. But her eyes did not. Maya, isn't it? Maya nodded. Come, let's have a chat. The suite smelled of expensive perfume and distance. On the table sat tea untouched. Mrs. Park motioned for Maya to sit. I hear you've made quite an impression on my son. Maya lowered her gaze. I didn't mean to. Let me be clear, the woman interrupted, her voice sweet and sharp. This ends now. Maya's breath caught. You are not his equal. You are a cleaner. Don't mistake kindness for a future. She poured the tea slowly, like poison. You should leave while you still have your dignity. Then she reached into her designer bag and pulled out a white envelope. This is enough money to start a new life somewhere far from here, far from him. Maya looked at the envelope, then back at the woman. She stood up slowly. I came here to work, she said quietly, not to beg and not to be bought. She left the envelope on the table, untouched, and without another word she walked out. But inside, something had cracked. And the next day, everything changed. Ji-hoon woke early, dressed before sunrise. He sat by the window, pretending to read, listening for footsteps in the hallway, waiting for the knock he'd come to expect, but it never came. By mid-morning, the silence grew too loud. He picked up the phone and called the kitchen. Where's Maya? There was a pause just long enough to mean something, then a quiet voice. Sir, she didn't report for duty today. Ji-hoon's chest tightened. Check again. But deep down, he already knew something was wrong. He called her supervisor. The answer was the same. She turned in her badge last night, left quietly with her sister. No forwarding address. Ji-hoon stood frozen, the phone still in his hand. Gone just like that. Ji-hoon tore through the suite like a man chasing a ghost. The empty teacups, the folded napkins, a small forgotten butt near the doorway, the scent she always left behind, faint cocoa butter still lingered. He called her number, switched off. He checked with staff, they knew nothing. No notes, no message, nothing. Later that night, Ji-hoon sat alone in the dark, staring out the window. The city lights sparkled beyond the glass, bright, busy, but meaningless without her. Then his phone rang. It was his mother. She didn't need to ask what was wrong. The silence in his voice. Enough? I hope you've come to your senses, she said gently but with steel beneath the words. He didn't answer, she continued. A man like you doesn't build a life with a girl like that. She was never meant to stay. She was a moment, Ji-hoon, not your future. His chest tightened. Did you do this? Did you drive her away? What did you say to her? He asked. I reminded her of the truth. No, you humiliated her. I protected you. I didn't need protecting. Her voice sharpened. She's just a cleaner. Ji-hoon, have you forgotten who you are? She was more real than anyone I've ever met. The line went silent. Then her final words came cold and sure. You'll thank me later. He ended the call without another word. Not because he was done, but because she would never understand. That night he went to Maya's neighborhood, walked to the rusty door, knocked. A neighbor stepped out. They left late last night. No goodbye. Where did they go? The woman shook her head. Didn't say, just carried a small bag and a sleeping child. Ji-hoon stood there for a long time, the moon watching him. He had lost deals before, lost sleep, lost partnerships, but never like this. This loss felt personal, like a door had shut inside his chest. And the worst part, he didn't know if she'd ever come back. Ji-hoon stopped attending board meetings. He canceled a product launch for the first time in his career. His team didn't understand. Investors were concerned. His assistant was in panic mode. But Ji-hoon had one focus now, finding Maya. He hired a private investigator, paid for database searches, checked hospitals, clinics, even community shelters. Nothing. She had vanished like smoke. Each night he returned to the suite, still booked, still untouched. He refused to leave. The room reminded him of her, the teacups, the chair by the window, the echo of soft footsteps that never returned. One afternoon, he sat on the hotel rooftop with his closest friend, Min-jun. She left without a word, Ji-hoon muttered, rubbing his temples. Are you sure it wasn't fear? Min-jun asked. Maybe she thought she didn't belong. She belonged more than anyone ever did. Then why didn't you tell her? Ji-hoon said nothing. Min-jun leaned forward. If she didn't leave a message, it means she was protecting herself, not rejecting you. Ji-hoon looked out at the skyline, his voice low. I thought I had time. Love doesn't wait, Ji-hoon, not forever. That night, Ji-hoon drove back to her old street again. The rusty door was still locked. A child's shoe sat forgotten in the dirt. He sat on the broken step for hours, phone in hand, hopping, praying for a message. None came. But the next morning, a small envelope arrived at the front desk. No return address, just his name written in familiar handwriting. He opened it slowly. Inside, a note. You gave me hope when I had none, but I need to find my own strength. Before I can stand beside you, Ji-hoon stared at it, heart hammering. She was alive. She was still out there. And though she had walked away, she hadn't closed the door completely. Now it was his turn to fight, not for a deal, not for an empire, but for the woman who made his silence feel like peace. Months later, the world had moved on. Business boomed again. Ji-hoon's face returned to Forbes covers. Bloomberg called him the visionary disruptor. But none of that mattered. The note from Maya stayed, folded in his wallet. He read it every night like a prayer. Then one Saturday morning, while attending a small community health outreach event in a town outside Lagos, something caught Ji-hoon's eye. Not a person, a notice board. Pinned to it was a flyer, slightly wrinkled but clearly printed. Free health literacy workshops for women, volunteer-led at Hope Community Center. And beneath it, in small handwritten script, organized by Miss Maya Okonkwo. He froze. Maya. He turned to a young volunteer nearby, pointing at the flyer. Do you know who this is? The woman smiled warmly. Oh, Miss Maya, she's amazing. She used to work at a hotel, I think. Then she started helping women in the community understand their health rights. Ji-hoon's chest tightened. The volunteer continued. Now she runs health literacy workshops twice a week. She doesn't get paid much, but she's dedicated. Says no woman should suffer in silence because she doesn't understand her options like her mother almost did. Ji-hoon leaned forward. Is she here now? She comes in the afternoons. The volunteer said, always wears this delicate silver bracelet. You'll recognize her when you see her. Ji-hoon stepped back, stunned. She hadn't disappeared. She hadn't run. She had stayed and grown. The sun was setting when Ji-hoon returned to the center. He waited quietly near the entrance, heart beating fast. Women's voices drifted from inside. A projector hummed. The air smelled of hope and determination. Then he saw her standing by the classroom door. Maya held a clipboard in one hand, her other hand resting gently on an elderly woman's shoulder. She was smiling softly, kindly. She looked tired but at peace. When the last participant left, she turned to lock the door and saw him. Her whole body froze. Ji-hoon, he stepped forward slowly. Hi, Maya, she blinked, confused. How did you find me? Smiled a little. You taught me something to look past what's shiny. I just followed the light. Maya looked down, shaking her head. You shouldn't be here. I had to see you. She crossed her arms, trying to stay strong. We're not from the same world, Ji-hoon. Your mother made that very clear. She was wrong. She's powerful. She won't accept someone like me. I don't need her permission, he said quietly. Maya turned her face away. You don't understand. I don't belong in your life. I don't wear designer clothes. I don't attend fancy galas. I can't sit at your table. He looked at her for a long moment, then pointed gently at her wrist, the silver bracelet. She said you didn't care, that I meant nothing to you, but you're still wearing it. Maya touched the bracelet slowly, her fingers trembling. I told myself to throw it away, she whispered so many times, but I couldn't because even when I left, I still loved you. Ji-hoon's voice broke. And I never stopped loving you. They stood in silence, the sky turning gold behind them. Finally, Maya stepped forward, her eyes wet, her voice quiet. So what now? He reached out. Took her hand gently. Now, Ji-hoon said, we write our own story. No mothers, no titles, just us. They didn't rush back to the city. For a few weeks, Ji-hoon and Maya stayed in the quiet town. No cameras, no headlines, no whispers behind their backs, just peace. In that quiet, Ji-hoon discovered things he never had time for. He walked barefoot down dusty roads with Amara chasing butterflies beside him. He helped Maya wash dishes by hand and laughed when he dropped a plate. He ate homemade meals, jollof rice and plantains, grilled fish, and swore they tasted better than anything private chef ever made. He slept in a small room with a rattling fan and woke to the sound of roosters, not stock alerts. And Maya, for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like she had to make herself smaller. She let him see the parts of her she used to hide, the fear, the strength, the dreams too big to say out loud. And he shared his too, the pressure of always being perfect, the fear of failing in front of the world, and how lonely wealth could feel. At night, they sat outside under the stars, with the sound of distant music filling the air. They didn't talk about boardrooms or backgrounds. They talked about who they were becoming. And slowly, without pressure, their love deepened. Not as a billionaire and a former cleaner, but as two people who had been broken in different ways and were learning how to heal together. 6 weeks later, the Azure Heights Hotel was buzzing again, not with gossip, but with camera flashes. Reporters lined the front entrance. Guests craned their necks. The staff whispered with wide eyes. Because this time, the billionaire wasn't arriving alone. Park Ji-hoon stepped out of the black car in a tailored charcoal suit, classic sharp. Beside him walked Maya in a simple cream dress, modest heels, and that same silver bracelet. She didn't cling to him, she didn't smile for the cameras. She simply walked beside him, calm, steady, sure. The headlines the next day read, Park Ji-hoon's surprise. The woman who changed the billionaire's heart isn't who you'd expect. They didn't care. They had nothing to prove. Inside the hotel, staff stood frozen. Some bowed respectfully, others looked away. Maya's former supervisor fumbled her tablet. Ji-hoon greeted them all politely, then turned to Maya. Ready, she nodded. They were there for a fundraising gala. One Ji-hoon had insisted be held in support of women's health education programs Maya helped design. She didn't want the spotlight. She wanted results. He gave her both. Later that night, as the ballroom lights dimmed and the applause rose for the final speech, Ji-hoon stepped onto the stage. He didn't speak about profits. He didn't talk about technology. He simply said, I met someone who reminded me that kindness doesn't wear designer labels. That strength doesn't come from wealth. And that love often walks in when you're not looking. The crowd fell silent, then slowly it stood. Maya, standing near the side, didn't cry. She simply watched him, steady, proud, and calm, with the same quiet fire that once lit her way through the hardest days. After the gala, they walked outside hand in hand. No security, no noise, just two people who had found each other in the unlikeliest of ways. I still think it's funny, Maya said with a smile. What is? How all this started with me falling asleep in your bed. Ji-hoon chuckled. Best accident of my life. And as the city lights blinked behind them, they stepped into the night. Not as billionaire and cleaner, but as equals, as home. The end. If you loved this story, make sure to like the video and subscribe to my channel for more captivating stories like this one.